All right, everybody. Welcome. It is Wednesday, December 30th, 2020. End of the year is just around the corner. This is the Along the Watchtower podcast. I am LM Walker. I'm here to talk about all of the things that I find interesting. So many things, but they usually end up these days revolving around the pandemic and the stimulus, because that's what's happening right now. We will get into some stuff about COVID stimulus. There's some weird stuff going on with a squirrel that we'll open up with because I just found the story utterly bizarre. There's some updates on the Breonna Taylor shooting and the cops that should honestly obviously have faced criminal charges. There's some interesting news going on regarding the Nashville bomber, the terrorist, because he's a terrorist, and the reluctance to call him a terrorist is very interesting. Because again, had he been Muslim, had he been a foreigner, we would have been claiming, oh my God, this is Islamic, what I mean? This is Islamic terrorism. This is, the attempt by ISIL. This is why we have to stay in Syria. That was one route it could have gone. So far, though, what we've seen is that utilities have been attacked with Warner, Anthony Quinn Warner. He was the Nashville bomber. He bombed well, he didn't bomb, but he blew himself up in front of an AT&T communications building, causing outages and affecting, things like the FAA. It was pretty tactical and very tactical and very high valued strike there. And then we had the Aspen bombing, that ended up, leaving thousands of people in -2-degree weather without heat or electricity. No, just without heat, excuse me. And yeah, there's been some new news on that. There actually has been another bombing here. Yeah, there's been a firebombing of a police station. So we'll get into that. And yeah, so there's not necessarily a wide swath, but there is a lot to go over today. Um, I also will just go over just real quick, just the hardcore, pandemic numbers, and it's not rocket science, and it's just like I realize, looking back briefly, on the brief history of this show, all of 26, 20, 25 episodes or whatever. I haven't just it's like 2.3%. The death rate globally is like 2.2%. It's that of the flu. We'll get into a doctor who mentions, as I've mentioned previously on this show, that now that it's entered the biosphere, we will see seasonal recurrences of COVID-19. That is to say that it will always be around, and then around the holiday season, around the flu season, you will see upticks. And then we'll read an article of a doctor talking about how the WHO has reached out and said, "Hey guys, you know what? You know how you all thought this was this was like the contagion level. Like, oh my God, it's not. This is not it." And expresses, like I said, like I've been talking about, like I'm not an epidemiologist or virologist, I'm just a curious person, but just from the things that I've read about previous diseases and vaccination campaigns that have been utilized to eradicate them, not only has this vaccination come at an expedited rate, the likes of which humanity has never seen, but the likelihood, because we saw Fauci, like 90%, it's got to be immunized in order to, and whether that be vaccine or naturally, in order for herd immunity to kick in. The likelihood of that happening with it mutating as rapidly, not rapidly, but in the way that it is unlikely. We have the new strain in the UK. That's also the strain in South Africa. We have the new strain in Nigeria. So we technically have the strain we know of. And by the way, the UK South African strain has been located in California. We'll get to that too. But first and foremost, please, pray to please like, share, and subscribe if you like what I'm doing. I could always use the support. And either way, I'm going to keep doing what I do. There will be more angles. What I want to do is I want to try and go out. And what I mean by that is I want to go out into, and go out and actually take note of the sorts of, activism that is happening out there, and kind of get the take from people. But I think I very much need to work on not only my approach, but I need to get the equipment for that. Either way, more things to come. Always going to try to do it big, do it better. But that said, Let's talk about Songbird for a second. So Songbird, the movie I mentioned yesterday, I did just go and watch it, and it's definitely a Blumhouse level take on it. Blumhouse is a production company that came out with movies like the Hunt, which is the movie about like wealthy liberals hunting ne'er-do-well, right-leaning, despicable types. I actually used the term despicable in the movie. It actually caused a lot of controversy because, it came out during a very contentious time amongst not only the left and the right, but amongst really black people and white folks. And so, I kind of saw where they were going. By the way, to correct myself from yesterday, I mentioned that in watching the trailer, I thought that there was some sort of automated lock system on the. That's not the case. What it is that all of the houses that have been newly created have, spoiler alert, have they have UV sterilization systems. And what's interesting is that there's a company called UV Applied Sciences, which I was going to invest in. But I decided not to. But everyone's like, "Oh, killing Corona with UV is dumb." And it's like, well, no, it's not dumb. It's trying to have it mass produced. That would be difficult, and trying to proliferate technology, functional technology like that everywhere. Because it would be useful if you could, like, go to board a cruise and get UV scanned and supposedly burn everything that could be COVID infected off, right? You're in a hotel room and you can UV. Right? You're starting to see the prolific applications here. Something like that would be great, but it's got to be functional and it's got to be like 100%, right? So that's why that company hasn't really taken off. However, to go back to the movie, what ended up happening is that the Department of Sanitation is the department going around and ripping people out of their homes, and it's like, what did the Department of Health do that? What's happened here, to go back to what I said at the top of the show about the COVID stats, right? Out of 80 million people, we've had like something 2 million deaths, something like that. The mortality rate in the movie is like 54%. So half of everyone who gets it dies. Something that extreme, that's a totally different case. So, but I digress. The movie is an extreme example because it's COVID-23. We're at COVID-19, so we still have like 4 more like serious mutations to go. I guess whatever. But I just wanted to come back to that because, again, we talked briefly about New York State Assembly Bill 416, which talks about with the declaration of a health emergency by the governor himself or herself, or any health official, head of health services official, can order the detention and removal of anyone who is deemed a risk to public health, anyone who's sick, anyone who's infected. So I'm always weary of bills like that. We saw on the website, because the New York State Assembly website, they're very kind to those who didn't see Schoolhouse Rock and watch the I Am a Bill segment and how things get passed. They have a little graphic, and on the graphic it details, it's been passed by the Assembly, it's been passed by the State Senate, it's getting sent to the governor, he's probably going to sign it, because why not? People don't even know that that's a thing. Like, no one even knew that had been proposed. It's supposed to go into effect in January 16th, I think it read, or 6th. But no one even knew that this thing was proposed. I've seen nothing about it in mainstream media. There's random message boards that brought it up, and I was like, this can't be. Is this real? Yes. So there's that. So that's what made me want to watch the movie. So let's talk about a squirrel. Or squirrels. I'm not sure if it's multiple. Apparently, there has been a slew of rodent attacks, squirrel attacks, and it's in Queens where I'm at, because I see squirrels everywhere, and I'm like, really? They're attacking people? They're coming that close? But there's been a slew of squirrel attacks, and it's left people like pretty bloody. So we're just gonna start off on a semi-hilarious note. Furious squirrel accused of carrying out string of frenzied attacks in Queens, says the Daily Beast. I know, it's the Daily Beast. Take care of your nuts, folks. I don't even want to read this. Is it seriously? All right, I'm going to ABC. Aggressive squirrel attacks reported in Queens neighborhood. Wow, for the viewers, it's just like this still image of a squirrel on a window looking cute as can be. Residents in Queens have reported at least 5 attacks from aggressive squirrels since late November. Most of the attacks have happened on 65th Drive near Fitchett Street in Rego Park. One woman needed to visit the emergency room after her hand was bitten by a squirrel. Others have said that they were afraid to walk in their own neighborhood due to the critters. Critters got people punked. They got them punked. I mean, it's interesting that given how, anxious and contentious a time it is for humans, how now even the animals are starting to become overtly aggressive. It's unfortunate. To continue, Michelin Frederick said she was attacked on December 21st. It just basically runs up my leg, and I'm like, okay, squirrel, hello, what are you doing? She said. He either bit or scratched me on my neck, and then I must have reached over, and next thing I know, it's a cage match, and I'm losing. Her hands were covered with blood and bruises. She got a rabies shot as a precaution before warning her neighbor, Alicia Wang. Wang says she was also then attacked. I tried to shake it off, and I couldn't. Excuse me. Squirrels have claws. Clinging to your winter jacket, there's no way to shake it off. At least 3 other people have been attacked in similar encounters with either a single rogue squirrel or a pack. They have reached out to the city for help but were told to hire their own licensed trapper, which they did, but so far have not seen results. Worried for the children. That's what most people are scared with the kids. Some experts say the reason the squirrels might be approaching the humans is because people have been feeding them. However, those who spoke to Eyewitness News said they have not been feeding them or chasing them. They have simply been minding their own business. When we leave the house, we have to carry mom's homemade pepper spray to make sure if it comes at us, we spray it. I'm sorry. Yeah. But you would think in a situation where, we have to go and round up those who are sick, it would be the Department of Health and not Sanitation. And that something like maybe Department of Sanitation or Animal Control would deal with the squirrels. But, I don't know. Here's the thing. If we saw this like globally or at least nationwide, then I'd be like, that's peculiar. But I mean, animals attack. That happens. You see this with pigeons, and I've seen it with crows. I've seen it with rats. And I mean, it seems to be, I don't know, this one particular neighborhood, maybe they're on meth. I don't know. I have no, I have no speculative scenario that you could come up with that would answer to that. I don't know. But it is interesting. Something tells me that if there is any sort of follow up, it would only be, in the aspect of more people being attacked, which, you don't want to see. You don't want to see people get hurt. But, yeah. All right. So back to the humans, the contentious humans. Bill to ban biological men from women's sports gains bipartisan support in Congress. Now, regardless of where you stand on it, I do think that a lot of the time issues like these are politicized and they are taken advantage of. Now, as far as the government's ability or the government's, obligation to regulate whether or not transgendered women, right? So men who have transitioned into women should be able to play in sports. Firstly, I haven't really gone through the article. There was the attempt by Tulsi Gabbard introducing a bill to reaffirm Title IX. And that was for the regulation of sports by sex, but that was about government funding, and that wasn't about banning outright. It was the whole thing about, well, we don't want to fund sports programs that allow, transgender of any kind, transgender. Mainly, it's about transgender men playing in women's sports. Right, and so this article begins. Tulsi Gabbard introduced legislation to ban biological males from participating in women's sports, but that's not the case, and that's why I very much find that when it comes to bills like these, and in particular articles like these, I guess I should be more specific because this article is kind of late to the game. There's definitely an attempt to skew the narrative. However, it's a thing where I don't believe the government has the obligation, nor really should have the authority to determine whether or not sports programs allow, or who sports programs allow. If they so choose to do so, that's their right. And however much of a detriment it is to female athletes, if that's the way they want to move, that's the way they want to move. I'm not a fan of micromanagement by the government one way or the other, if it's beneficial to me or not. Because the fact is, function creep is a huge issue with large bureaucracies and with governments in general, where everything starts out to be in particular towards one objective or another. And over time, as administrations change, as governing bodies move and shift, and people are voted in and out, the function, right, the main objective becomes tertiary, becomes secondary, tertiary, becomes sometimes in some cases not even really considered. So, I'm always wary of things like that. But this guy's late to the game. But yeah. Moving on to the IMF, we have to love the IMF, right? They help impoverished nations, up and coming impoverished nations, third world nations, by giving them large loans with high interests in short terms to pay it back. And then when they can't pay it back, they end up, defaulting, being in perpetual debt, having to give up natural resources. They're good. Your credit score should be based on your web history, says the IMF, right? I feel bad for you guys who are definitely on Spank Bank too much. With more services than ever collecting your data, it's easy to start asking why anyone should care about most of it. This is why, because people are having ideas like this, says Gizmodo. In a new blog post for the International Monetary Fund, four researchers presented their findings from a working paper that examines the current relationship between finance and tech, as well as its potential future. Gazing into their crystal ball, the researchers see the possibility of using the data from your browsing, search, and purchase history to create a more accurate mechanism for determining the credit rating of an individual or business. They believe that this approach could result in greater lending to borrowers who could potentially be denied by traditional financial institutions. Here's the thing. If traditional financial institutions deny a borrower based on their credit history without knowing the nuances of what they go and look at online, I can't imagine the perversions of people who go and ask for loans. And I can furthermore not imagine anyone wanting to lend money based off of what you go and look at on the internet. That is a scary thought, and I really hearken that to the Chinese, the attempt or the position by the Chinese to, and I'm pretty sure it's been implemented, being utilized as we speak, the people's credit system, where your credit score is based off of, really, it's similar to Black Mirror, where if you are found likable or liked based off of like your web history, your social media, then you'll have a high credit score, right? You're regarded you have a high regard by the people. You have a high credit score. We saw in that Black Mirror episode with Bryce. I can't remember her name, but it's Bryce something. She's the daughter of Ron Howard, Bryce Dallas Howard, I believe her name is, where the credit score for everyone is based off of how liked you are, and you would literally have, a UI in front of you, a digital UI, and you would hit a like for someone walking by. Oh, you look nice today. Oh, gee golly williker, thanks, man. You hit a like, and they hit a like, and you go by. Hey, you look nice today. Whatever, I'm gonna piss off. They're having a bad day, then you get a dislike, and that affected the ability for you to get a loan, for you to get a mortgage for a house, for you to function in society. The reality is that people need their privacy in order to express themselves how they see fit. Can you imagine a world where everything you do, and I mean, we pretty much living in that, where everything you do is not only like monitored to a degree or another, but is like regarded publicly, openly, right? Like institutions look at the things that you do all day long on your phone, on your tablet, on your PC, and by looking at that, determine whether or not you are a worthy person to give money to. Unbelievable. To continue, at its heart, the paper is trying to wrestle with the dawning notion that the institutional banking system is facing a serious threat from tech companies like Google, Facebook, and Apple. The researchers identify two key areas in which this is true. Tech companies have greater access to soft information, and messaging platforms can take the place of the physical locations that banks rely on for meeting with customers. The concept of using your web history to inform credit ratings is framed around the notion that lenders rely on hard data that might obscure the worthiness This is what I mean. You are not worthy. It could, this is the problem, right? One way or another. If you use an automated system to do this, you're definitely going to miss the nuances of a person's character based off of the things they do in the quiet of the night. And then if you're a person, your own personal bias is going to be hard, very, I imagine, near impossible to not have a conflict of interest with. Like, I just, this is absurd. This is the Orwellian present, right? You like that? To continue, citing soft data points like the type of browser and hardware used to access the internet, the history of online searches and purchases that could be incorporated into evaluating a borrower, the researchers believe that when a lender has a more intimate relationship with the potential client's history, they might be more willing to cut them some slack. So they're actually suggesting that the appraisers, we'll call them, the credit appraisers' bias will work into the borrower's favor. I wonder if Google, when they hired their fleet of curators for YouTube, thought the same thing. I wonder if, because I mean, at least it's an acknowledgement that bias is built in to these very sensitive positions that human beings who are fallible liars and cheats and all sorts of a myriad of things from good to bad happen to occupy. It's far too much. That's far too much information. That's far too much reach into the personal lives of individuals. One, and giving that information, giving the ability for that person's life to be affected by people knowing that information to a person. Number two. To conclude, banks tend to cushion credit terms for their long-term customers during downturns. This is because they have a history and relationship with the customer. Now imagine the kind of intimate history that Facebook could have with the borrower, and suddenly its digital cash initiative starts to make more sense. Yes, I'm sure it does. So, I love to, and of all people, it is the IMF, which has a notorious history of taking advantage of third world countries and impoverished people. That is definitely not someone who I want to have, not only again have access to my intimate information, but then be able to judge me based off of it. No thanks. Breonna Taylor. The Breonna Taylor shooting, in a nutshell, to kind of surmise for those who may or may not recall, or may or may not know, and forgive me if I misrecall this, but basically it was a no-knock warrant that was served to her home in the middle of the night while she was sleeping with her boyfriend. Her home was erroneously picked out because they ended up catching the drug dealer. It was over drugs, distribution. They ended up catching the drug dealer, who himself was like, yeah, I'm not. She doesn't get involved with that stuff. Da 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 da. And yeah, it was served to her house erroneously, and boyfriend shot. They shot back and killed her, and yeah. So here we are. And Breonna Taylor shooting, reads Deadline. Louisville police moved to fire 2 more officers involved in deadly raid. And see, the whole thing here is about not only the illegality, the malconstitutionality of no-knock warrants, but how it was erroneously served. Like, she wasn't even involved in the investigation, or rather, either that or she was erroneously involved in the investigation. The Louisville Police Department is moving to oust the officer who fired the shot that killed Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old black emergency room technician, during a flawed early morning raid on her home. The department is also seeking to fire a second officer who obtained a judge's approval for the poorly planned raid. What about the judge? Officer Miles Cosgrove and Detective Joshua James both received predetermination letters Tuesday, their lawyers told media outlets. Both officers will appear at a hearing before Police Chief Yvette Gentry on Thursday, and they can also appeal the chief's final decision. A ballistics analysis determined that Cosgrove fired the shot that killed Taylor. James was not present during the raid, but prepared the search warrant for Taylor's apartment. Both have been on administrative reassignment as investigations continue into the case. And it's never criminal charges. It's always reassignment, golden parachute, early retirement, whatever have you. The politics of this is condemning to anything fucking decent. To continue, only one other officer has been punished so far for his involvement in the botched raid. Brett Hankinson, a detective, was fired in June for violating the department's deadly force policy. He was indicted by a grand jury on 3 counts of wanton endangerment for firing shots that endangered a neighboring apartment. He has pled not guilty. Taylor was killed on March 13th when the officers executed a no-knock warrant on the home she shared with her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker. The police were looking for Taylor's ex-boyfriend, Jamarcus Glover, who allegedly was a known drug trafficker. Walker, who said he believed the home was being robbed, opened fire on the officers, striking one of them in the leg. They returned fire, striking and killing Taylor. That story is disputed. The killing of Taylor and the police killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis, as well as the case of Ahmaud Arbery, sparked a nationwide protest last spring that called on cities to divert more money from police departments. Like, BLM has been around for like 15 years. It's been around since the Obama administration. And it continues to amaze me when articles point out or try to suggest or insinuate that it's a new, it's a new thing. Well, I guess, and here's the thing. I think that a lot of this news is really coming out because all of it can slip under the radar as the pandemic rages. Because I'm not really seeing a lot of promotion about this on mainstream media, honestly. I'm reading this from a Deadline article. So, all right. So, violence from jackbooted police officers. We got violence from the right. We got violence from the left. Some violence from the left. Trans Antifa arrested over Seattle police station firebombing. A third militant Antifa has been arrested and charged with arson over a firebombing attack on a Seattle police station. Jeremy Michael Haynes, 34, of Bremerton, Washington, was arrested by Seattle police earlier this month and charged with first-degree attempted arson. Haynes, who is a transsexual and known by the name Naomi Cassandra Krell, has been arrested multiple times this year at violent Antifa protests, but the latest serious felony charge makes her the third suspect arrested over a firebombing attack on an occupied Seattle police station in September. Haynes is accused by the state of Washington of being part of a mob who carried out an organized attempt to burn down a police station, Seattle Police Department's East Precinct, on September 1st. Ex-realtor Danielle Elizabeth McMillan and Jacob Bennett Greenberg, the 2 other identified suspects, were arrested and charged in October. On the night of the attack, around 100 Antifa dressed in black bloc and riot gear gathered at Cal Anderson Park, the location of the previous Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone, or CHAZ, where there were 11 people shot and I think 5 of them died. They then marched to the adjacent police station where they proceeded to carry out coordinated firebombings using Molotov cocktails. According to the criminal complaint, Haynes was armed with a baseball bat and used a large umbrella to shield McMillan while she lit the wick of a Molotov cocktail which was thrown toward the police station but failed to ignite. Antifa used umbrellas to shield themselves and their comrades from CCTV cameras and journalists while in the act of preparing or carrying out criminal activities. So, yeah, what more is there that I can say? Every day there will be reports of violence from the left and violence from the right, or reports of previous acts of violence and more information on them thereof. I refuse to act as most people who most people who aren't conservative or right-leaning generally try to ignore the some of them acts of terror, like the possible bombing of the gas line in Colorado, Aspen, Colorado, by allegedly the Earth First eco terrorist group. That's what they are. I won't, like, violence is violence, and the zealotry, right, and the escalation will only serve to embolden more zealots. You will only, and this is the thing, you have people who have a considerable amount of conviction, a considerable amount of heart and passion involved in trying to, as I've mentioned before, trying to steer humanity, steer our species, not just this country, but steer people altogether towards, towards one of the better outcomes, one of the many outcomes that are better than what we're looking at. Being on a precipice collectively, we're staring off of the edge of the cliff instead of up to the sky to soar. And I can understand the need to engage passionately, but without foresight and without any sort of consideration in mind of what you're doing and the effects that it's going to have thereof, because you got to live with these people at the end of the day. So constant combative volatility, destructive attitudes, it's not going to help. It's not going to help. As I've said, once you eliminate communication, that only leaves expatriation, incarceration, or elimination. That's it. Those are the four things that we do with our, I don't want to say enemies, but with those that we contend with. We communicate with them. If we can't as a society, we then incarcerate them, and then hopefully they get released. And if they get released and it's not working, they used to expatriate them. That's what America started out as. Britain used to send people here. Forgot what it was called. It's basically relocation. And similar to Australia as a penal colony, you were sent here. You became an indentured servant. Hopefully your lay lord was a nice guy, and fulfilled your contract once you were done with it. And that's expatriation. And then if you didn't do that, and you came back to the UK, for example, as I mentioned just previously, then they'd there's elimination. That's it. That's all we can do as a society and as people collectively, on any level, individual or otherwise. If we eliminate talking in a dialogue, you don't leave a lot of pretty options. That's all I'm saying. So, with violence on the left, we have violence on the right. Well, allegedly, we don't even really know if the Nashville bomber was right-leaning. Anthony Quinn Warner, I believe is his name. His girlfriend. This is another case of the FBI and their ineptitude. Well, ineptitude. We'll put that. We got to do that. I got to be real about mine. Ineptitude. Those are air quotes for our listeners. So we don't know if it's ineptitude. We don't know. I will err on the side of not knowing. And as a result of not knowing, everything is speculative for the most part. But what we do know is that the girlfriend warned the FBI a year ago, I think it says, that, this dude is making bombs, right? And we've seen that with other mass shooters where there have been reports. And I mean, I think this goes as far back as the Columbine shooters, I want to say, but I'm not sure. But for a lot of mass shooters and domestic terrorist attacks, there's usually someone somewhere amongst law enforcement, whether it be the FBI or local police, that's conducted an investigation, or they've received reports, or they've had previous history. It's never just like an out of nowhere thing. There's always something. So Time reads, Nashville man's girlfriend warned police he was building bombs. More than a year before Anthony Warner detonated a bomb in downtown Nashville on Christmas, officers visited his home after his girlfriend told police that he was building bombs in his RV, according to documents obtained by the AP. But they were unable to make contact with him or see inside his RV. Officers were called to Pamela Perry's home in Nashville on the 21st of August, 2019, after getting a report from her attorney that she was making suicidal threats while sitting on her front porch with firearms. A police report said Raymond Throckmorton, the attorney, told officers that day that he also represented Warner. When officers arrived at the home, police said she had 2 unloaded pistols sitting next to her on the porch. She told them those guns belonged to Tony Warner, and she did not want them in the house any longer. Perry, then 62, was transported for psychological evaluation after speaking to mental health professionals on the phone. Throckmorton told the Tennessean that Perry had fears about her safety and thought Warner may harm her. The attorney was also at the scene that day and told officers Warner frequently talks about the military and bomb making. Warner knows what he is doing and is capable of making a bomb. Police then went to Warner's home, located about 1.5 miles from Perry's home, but he didn't answer the door when they knocked several times. They saw the RV in the backyard, but the yard was fenced off and officers couldn't see inside the vehicle. The report said there were also several security cameras and wires attached to alarm signs on the front door. Officers then notified supervisors and detectives. They saw no evidence of a crime and had no authority to enter his home or fence property. That's true. After officers visited Warner's home last August, the police department's hazardous devices unit was given a copy of the report. During that week, they contacted Throckmorton. Police said officers recalled Throckmorton saying Warner did not care for the police and that he wouldn't allow Warner to permit a visual inspection of the RV. And that Warner wouldn't allow a visual inspection of the RV. Throckmorton disputes that he told police they couldn't search the vehicle. I have no memory of that whatsoever, he told the Tennessean. I didn't represent him anymore. He wasn't an active client. I'm not a criminal defense attorney. But you were, okay, so what kind of attorney are you? You were the attorney that was called for the girlfriend at the time in case she was going to get arrested for having the guns. Throckmorton told the news, yeah, he doesn't want to be part of this. Throckmorton told the newspaper he represented Warner in a civil case several years ago and that Warner was no longer his client in 2019, August. Somebody somewhere dropped the ball, he said. A day after officers visited Warner's home, the police report and identifying information about him were sent to the FBI to check their databases and determine whether Warner had prior military connections. Later that day, the police department said the FBI reported back that they checked their holdings and found no records. FBI spokesperson told the Tennessean the agencies had conducted a standard agency-to-agency record check. 6 days later, the FBI reported that the DoD checks on Warner were all negative. No other information about Warner came to the department or the FBI's attention after August 2019. At no time was there any evidence of a crime detected and no additional action was taken. The ATF also had no information on him. Warner's only arrest was as in 1978 for marijuana. And so there's that. There's nothing. I mean, there's possible culpability, possible negligence on the part of the FBI, but other than that, there's not much yet. So we know that, he talked to the neighbor, said that they're going to remember me. Whoa. And that's you. And then the neighbor had the audacity to say, well, there was no red flags. Like, that's usually a red flag. And then, the girlfriend. And then we have the other guy who, as far as we've been told, is his issue is unrelated. But near a church, he was in an RV with a similarly playing message, which actually I forgot to look for an update on that. We don't know what that message was. Apparently that hasn't been released yet. So that's it. That's all she wrote, folks. Yeah. Excuse me. And this is just an ABC article, just doubling down on what we just read. But the latest theory, and here's where I kind of become a bit concerned. I always become a bit concerned when people point at silly things and say, "Oh, this silly thing, right? This ridiculous thing is dangerous." Right? That in and of itself sets a dangerous precedent. Because for starters, the first thing that comes to mind is satire. The Babylon Bee, for example. There's been okay. The best analogy I can make, all right, is the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit, where the woman who got third-degree burns from spilling her McDonald's hot coffee on herself sued McDonald's, and then, as far as I know, that's why they have the hot coffee, the label warning, whatever. But she won. She won that lawsuit because, but technically they did not on the cup warn her that the contents of the cup were hot, right? So the thing is it's the relinquishing of responsibility for oneself when something like a Babylon Bee article comes out and people take it seriously, even though it's satire. Even though if you do take something seriously, you should always do some cross-referencing. You should always, cite your source. And, I still haven't put up my news guard. See, I'm always concerned about that. My whole thing is always cite multiple sources. There's no reason why you can't just do a Google search, pick up multiple articles. That way you get as much information as possible. And, and here's the thing. It's like, I understand if you don't have time to do that. That's fine. But then why go around proliferating half bits of information, tidbits, sound bites? Like, you're doing not only yourself a disservice, you're doing the people you're speaking with a disservice. But that's just me. But the next article we're reading, and for the viewers, we were watching that little ABC video there. Oh Lord, this is blown up. So feds probing whether Nashville bomber believed in lizard people conspiracy. Right? Whenever they tie conspiracy theories, alternative information, and some of it, I call some of it alternative information. What do I mean by alternative information? Okay. So alternative information, by that, I mean things like Graham Hancock, right? Graham Hancock is an anthropologist that, and I'm hesitant to say alternative because he is a degreed professor in anthropology. He's got decades upon decades of research and academic stewardship behind him. There's no reason why what he's saying should not be found credible given the decades and decades of work he's applied to this particular topic of information. That topic being the ancient astronauts theory, right? That extraterrestrials have visited the Earth and yada yada yada, so on and so forth. When information like that, right, is, and I'm not suggesting that he is a proponent of the lizard theory, but his work is considered alternative information for some reason. Even though, like any anthropologist, he's been to dozens, maybe hundreds of sites from the ancient world, from the pyramids of Giza to the tombs of the ancient kings in Egypt to the Angkor Wat in Cambodia to the terracotta statues. Like, he's been all over. He's been everywhere. He's been on every continent, and he's been beneath the continents into the sea. He has a whole portion where he intercedes the work that he does on land, on the surface of the earth, with work that he's done subterraneously. Like, it's a fascinating body that spans decades, reaching out to the 80s. It's like 35 years of work, books and documentaries, all sorts of stuff. You can actually find that on my documentary channel. I have a channel dedicated to documentaries, historical archival footage, things like that. It's called the Chronaxial Archives. Please go take a look. It's a very, very fascinating treasure trove. I love it. Anyway, I digress. But all that is found alternative. And when it's found alternative, it can be placed into a bucket and by the wayside with a far-reaching extreme of views, like lizard people. So I'm always weary when, like, oh, he was online looking at the lizard people stuff. He was probably looking at Alex Jones. See, it's people like Alex Jones. And that's how it begins. That's how they link these things together. So, NBC News, feds probing whether Nashville bomber believed in lizard people conspiracy. And that's like that's the OG conspiracy nut job theory. That's OG tinfoil hat wearing shit. The lizard people conspiracy, and it's like, he couldn't be a flat earther, right? He couldn't be let me see. He couldn't be a flat earther. He couldn't be an anti-vaxxer, right? He couldn't be a 9/11 truther. He couldn't be he couldn't be like a fraudulent election supporter or anything like that. No, he had to be into lizard people. He had to be into the reptilian theory. David Icke. You guys remember David Icke, right? So, investigators are aware of statements the suspect made about a conspiracy theory that powerful politicians and Hollywood figures are lizards who have extraterrestrial origins. Here we go. Investigators are exploring several conspiracy theories as potential motives behind the Christmas Day bombing outside an AT&T building in Nashville, Tennessee, including evidence that the bomber believed in lizard people and a so-called reptilian conspiracy. Two senior law enforcement officials said Wednesday. You see, for viewers, I can hardly keep my I can't take the smile off, because it's like, I see what you're doing. It's unbelievable. And it's like, here's the thing. We'll read the article. Investigators are expected to conclude their crime scene work this week, but it could take several more weeks until they determine the motive of the bomber, Anthony Quinn Warner, who died in the blast. Since Saturday, authorities have been examining Warner's digital devices, which an official said includes a significant trove of pictures, videos, and writings, looking for any clues to what drove the man to set off a powerful bomb inside his recreational vehicle, which took down communication networks and injured several people in downtown Nashville. Specifically, investigators are looking into the suspect's previous trips to an undisclosed location in Tennessee, where he would camp out in his RV and, according to the suspect's statements and others, hunt possible aliens. In addition, investigators are aware of statements the suspect made about an internet conspiracy that powerful politicians and Hollywood figures are actually lizards or other reptiles who have extraterrestrial origins and are taking over society. The resurgence of the reptilioids, adherents of the unfounded conspiracy. We really need to be told that the adherents of the unfounded conspiracy theory believe that politicians and other prominent people, including the Clintons and the comedian Bob Hope, and it's like, why did you bring up Bob Hope, who died in 2003, are actually lizard-like creatures sent to Earth and are responsible for a number of historic tragedies. Justin Bieber and the Obamas have also been named in the conspiracy theory. Oh my God, they're pouring it on. Federal investigators have also asked associates and acquaintances of Warner whether he believed in an equally unfounded conspiracy theory about AT&T and 5G mobile service, and whether that was a motive for choosing the AT&T building as the site of the bombing. A senior law enforcement official said investigators have cast a wide net that includes family, friends, neighbors, acquaintances, and businesses where he may have brought bomb-making supplies. The police department acknowledged the department has no officers on the Nashville Joint Terrorism Task Force, a group of federal, state, and local law enforcement agencies whose primary mission is to investigate potential terrorist threats. So nobody of a appropriate department is working on it, is what he's saying. He would rectify the issue, he said, and assign officers to the task force. Shouldn't you have done that by now? Yeah, and so that's it. Like I said, I'm always weary. Here's the thing is that the 5G theory has much more plausibility, but they just have to do things like this with the lizard people. It also doesn't help that there's like trickles of information coming out about this guy. You would think that, a journalist seeking higher exaltation than just clicks would wait until they go through the trove of pictures, videos, and writings, but that's just me, I guess. And we are back to the pandemic. Politico, no realistic path. McConnell rejects standalone stimulus check increase. I can't say that I am surprised. Oh, no. All right, ready? So I am surprised, but let's start on a higher note, on a somewhat better note. $600 stimulus checks have actually gone out through direct deposit for some people. It started yesterday, which really surprised me, the speed, because all of the calculators were estimating that it was going to happen. It was just the first direct deposit was going to happen January 4th. This is what I'm saying. This shit is always wrong. But it has been on the way for some people. Let's read CNBC. $600 stimulus has been sent out. Here's who will get them first. The $600 stimulus check from the latest COVID relief bill are officially on their way. Checks could arrive as early as Tuesday evening for those who have direct deposit. The IRS also confirmed that initial direct deposits began on Tuesday and will continue through next week. Some Americans may see the direct deposit payments as pending or as provisional payments in their accounts before the official payment date of January 4th. There we go. Your stimulus check will come this way if you set up direct deposit with the IRS for your 2019 tax return by providing them with your bank account information. If that information is changed, it will delay the receipt of your stimulus check. Direct deposits will start Tuesday evening and continue through next week. Paper checks and debit cards. If you don't have direct deposit set up with the IRS, it will likely take longer for a check to arrive, as it will be mailed to you either in the form of a paper check or debit card. In addition, if you do have direct deposit set up but don't receive your check this way by early January, keep a close eye on the mail. Paper and debit card checks will begin to be mailed to eligible recipients on Wednesday. For those getting either a paper check or debit card, payments will conclude in January. Later this week, eligible Americans will be able to track the status of their check through the Get My Payment tool, if we all remember that. And that's helpful, but the problem here is that we needed more. They played games with this. Mitch McConnell, Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer. They played lots of games. Biden came in and actually supported the what's the word I'm looking for? Capitulation on the part of the Democrats, who first asked for 1,200. Were rebuffed with 600. Biden came in and said, I don't see 1,200 as being realistic, which then gave centrist plan of, I'm sorry, I misspoke. Republicans, I don't believe, wanted a boost at all. I'm sorry, they didn't want to give out a stimulus. They wanted it to do a boost in unemployment. Democrats wanted both, including a $1,200 stimulus check. Biden came in and said, I don't really see both with this $1,200 check possible. that boosted the idea for a centrist plan of $600, $300 unemployment. And that's where we are. So then Sanders came in with Hawley at the last minute, right before it was to be signed. It was agreed in the House and the Senate. It was sent to Trump while Trump was stalling. Sanders and Hawley came out with a bill that was rebuffed by Senator Jackson. Okay. So you have Manchin and Sanders kind of arguing before, the decision was made. And what's interesting about Manchin, he's the senator from West Virginia, which is number 50 in terms of poverty. They're one of the most impoverished, if not the most impoverished state in the union. And so Trump signed it. And then right after Trump signed it, the House got together and passed another bill for $2,000, to which McConnell rejected because it was it was a separate bill that was rejected as a standalone, right? It was rejected as standalone. It was the second separate bill. What ended up happening is the reasoning behind McConnell's rejection, and I thought this was masterful, this was a skillful stroke on his part, is that he tied Trump's issues with the NDAA to the stimulus bill. Remember, Trump vetoed the NDAA for not having a repeal for 230 and for something else, I can't remember. And no, he didn't. It's not the renaming thing. Well, let's read. Okay, Senator Majority Leader Mitch McConnell attacked the House-passed bill increasing stimulus to $2,000 on Wednesday, likely dooming the prospects of boosting payments as the 116th Congress comes to an end. The Kentucky Republican said the House's proposal is too generous for high earners and does not align with what the president has suggested. Oh, now this is what I'm saying. It's a cop-out. He bucks the president, on his way out. But when it suits him fine, he'll use the president as an excuse to not give us the money that we want, even though, ironically enough, it is the president who called for $2,000 after they passed $600. That's how politics is played. That's the game. And also keep in mind, we read the opinion piece, Mitch McConnell let it slip, that he knows direct payments, stimulus payments, are tied to the likelihood of the GOP candidates winning in Georgia. Okay? You would think that he would want to go for $2,000. The problem is that austerity and deficit hawkery has always been McConnell's standpoint. And with Biden in office and Biden supporting the stance of austerity, remember, Biden's the guy who wanted to cut Social Security. Okay, so he's all about deficit hawkery. He's all about keeping those numbers down. He's the one that got that kind of play. Well, basically, he played towards the centrist position to appease as many people as possible. Right? He helped to diminish this bill. Remember that. Always remember. I'm going to remind you of that every single fucking day. Every day. I'm going to remind you of these people. I'm going to make sure that you are aware of who is to blame for all of this. Everyone's to blame for all this. From Trump right on fucking down. Don't leave none of them out. Don't leave none of them out. So this asshole who is bucking the president is simultaneously using the president as an excuse to not pass the $2,000 bill. And so he said it has no realistic path to quickly pass the Senate. McConnell said he will not split up a bill. Check this out. He will not split up a bill combining the checks with an election fraud commission and a rollback of 230. So he's trapped the president because now the Trump has to either renege on those requests, right? Which again, everyone's talking about, oh, this is a coup, it's illegal, it's unconstitutional. No, these are legal requests that he's able to do constitutionally. He has to rescind those in order for the $2,000 bill to pass because McConnell won't split them. Masterstroke. This old fucker knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing. These people he's been on the Hill since the 80s, bro. He knows what he's doing. It's amazing. It is amazing. I'm sorry. It's diabolical. It's macabre, but I am in awe by how little regard they have, how little regard they have for humanity. I guess is the appropriate statement. So here we are. It is unlikely to pass. And if it had any likelihood, that likelihood is dissipated now that he's tied it to Trump's attempt to overturn the election. I won't say overturn, but attempts to challenge the election results. And so here we are. And so that's that. Going to be 600, probably going to stay at 600. 600 is better than zero. But, moving along, AstraZeneca in Oxford has been okayed by the UK government as we will see later on, we're going to talk about anaphylactic reactions from the vaccinations in general, most of which that I've talked about on this show have been from Pfizer. Excuse me. Yesterday we read a report about one from Moderna regarding facial fillers. So all you who love your cosmetic surgeries, look out. We'll read real quick. This is from the UK Gov site. Government update. The government has today accepted the recommendation from the MHRA to authorize the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccination for use. This is their second vaccination they've authorized. This follows rigorous clinical trials and a thorough analysis of the data by experts at the MHRA, which has concluded that the vaccine has met its strict standards of safety, quality, and effectiveness. The Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunization will also publish its latest advice for the priority groups to receive this vaccination. Yada, 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 yada. And so, yeah, they've approved a second vaccination. They don't, excuse me. We'll read this in this next article here from Deadline. Britain has ordered 100 million doses of the jab, which will be enough to vaccinate 50 million people of the country of 67 million. Remember, you got to get two. A big advantage of the AstraZeneca vaccination is that it can be stored in the fridge, unlike the first to be approved, Pfizer, which has to be stored at negative 70 degrees. You notice that Pfizer is also the largest of all of these companies. The last to be approved, and yet the first... it's like they are the largest of these companies. In America, at least, as far as I recall, they were the first to be approved, but the last to come out with information. Like right before they were approved, we started to see reports about their clinical data information. But the approval comes as the UK recorded 53,000 new cases of COVID on Tuesday, the biggest ever daily count, as a brutal second wave continues to sweep the nation. Yes, we know. I find this really weird. Boris Johnson has deployed the military to help secure UK schools against COVID. We're going to read this because what's interesting is I always will identify any sort of heavy-handed or militarized enforcement measure regarding COVID. We yesterday talked about, and a little bit today, talked about New York Assembly Bill 416, which is about the what I think is the unlawful and unconstitutional detention of those who are sick, right? If the governor declares a public health emergency. I point this out because I believe New Jersey is still in a state of emergency. But we'll read. Boris Johnson is bringing in the troops to help prepare British students to return to schools across the country after the winter holiday is over, even as his government continues to jack up new level 4 restrictions due to surging case numbers allegedly caused by a COVID strain that has mutated and become more infectious. Let's see here, because zero hedge. Bloomberg says Boris Johnson's government will draft in the armed forces to help with coronavirus testing in schools as pressure builds on the prime minister to delay students' return after the holidays amid a surge in cases. The Ministry of Defense said 1,500 personnel will help ensure testing systems are up and running when classrooms reopen next week. The government has previously said students facing public exams this year will return on January 4th, with other pupils later this month. But a growing number of unions, politicians, and scientists called for more time to prepare testing to prevent infections in schools. The number of new cases in the UK surged to a daily record of 41,000 on Monday, and hospitalizations exceed the peak recorded in the first wave in the spring as a more virulent strain of the virus takes hold. But again, is this like overnight visits? Are these people being hospitalized and having no symptomatic expression? We'll see. We'll going forward. We'll look at this because let's one thing at a time. So he's going to be implementing the Army, the MOD. He's going to be sending 1,500 Army personnel to codify virus implementations. That's not surprising. We have kind of been waiting for something like that in America. People got freaked out. Actually, what am I talking about? The National Guard has done something similar, although not in schools. So that's an interesting twist. But speaking of the British, variant, the more virulent variant, The Swiss are furious as 200 British skiers flee Verbier over COVID lockdown order. Apparently, these Swiss skiers got trapped. There's a lockdown imposed in Switzerland for UK visitors that they had to do a retroactive 10-day quarantine. So it was retroactive back to December 14th. They dipped out. They left. You're going to see that a lot more, where as you see lockdowns become more stringent, you will see people become more resilient and less inclined to participate in them. And it's just like between lies being told to the public, between the first lockdowns not working, between, honestly, the sort of hype and wishful thinking that's being told to us about the vaccinations, only for us to then be told, well, 90% of us are either going to have to be immune or vaccinated in order for this to go away, at the same time being told, well, we can't open everything until it goes away. Wait a minute. The 90% immunization or vaccination isn't going to happen. So herd immunity isn't going to happen. So if the government's saying we're not opening anything until herd immunity happens, you're looking at a long-term, perhaps lifelong restructuring of our lives. And I mean, that's pretty much happening already. But I digress. So we're on the back end of the show here, kind of. Still talking about pandemic stuff. Later on, we'll be talking more about the left and the right and the race in Georgia. That's usually how I want to end it, because, it's always perverted, sort of destitute, really depraved stuff coming out about the Reverend, whose name always escapes me. It's not Walton, Raphael something. And because I don't care for him or about him. And then you have Loeffler, whose name escapes me, Purdue and Loeffler, and their level of corruption seems to keep escalating as more information comes out. There's something really stuck in my throat. And yeah, we will end with Walmart, right? We will end with the bias of corporations and news organizations. And I always want to point this out because people are like, oh, it's a corporation, they just want to make money. It's like, true, but corporations are run by money. And run by people, excuse me. But they are run by, these people basically become walking dollar signs. But I digress. But corporations are run by people who have opinions. And the reality is when you become a super multi-billion, multinational corporation, you tend to feel like you can do whatever you want. And when you're someone like Walmart or Amazon, you kind of do what you want. But back to pandemic stuff, Boston doctor reports serious allergic reaction after getting Moderna's COVID vaccine. This will be the second report of Moderna reactions. The patient, who has a severe shellfish allergy, there we go, at least they have a history of allergies, recovered quickly with treatment. Until now, reports of severe reactions had been linked to the Pfizer vaccine. That's not entirely true. We again read about those with facial fillers having anaphylactic reactions, and they don't want to really promote that because millions of people get facial fillers per year. So yeah, that's a major one. A Boston physician said he developed a severe allergic reaction minutes after receiving Moderna's coronavirus vaccine on Thursday. The case was the first of its kind reported to be linked to Moderna's vaccine. Well, the first of its kind. Federal agencies are investigating at least 6 cases involving people who suffered anaphylaxis after receiving Pfizer vaccines, which contained similar ingredients during the first few weeks. Officials with the FDA and CDC had discussed the reactions involving some of the Pfizer cases, but have not determined whether an ingredient in the vaccine has caused the reactions. A few healthcare workers in Britain had also experienced anaphylaxis after receiving the Pfizer vaccine earlier this month. The incident on Thursday involved Dr. Hossein Sadera, a geriatric oncologist at Boston, that's sad, at Boston Medical Center, who has a severe shellfish allergy and had an appointment to get the Moderna shot in the afternoon. In the interview, the doctor said he experienced a severe reaction almost immediately after he was inoculated, feeling dizzy with his heart racing. So I want to point that out because, the article was brought to my attention by the coronavirus, this page, a Quora page. Quora is a weird thing. It's basically this thing that just ask questions and people who like trivia and asking questions and get together and ask questions. It's a community for inquiry. But that said, it says first report of severe allergic reaction to Moderna's vaccine. It's not the first report. The facial filler is the first report we heard. There's been 15 plus allergic reactions to Pfizer's vaccines, 7 plus severe. I haven't heard 15, but it's definitely more than 7. Expected level in most vaccines, it continues, is 1.31 in 1 million. Why are we seeing much higher levels of anaphylaxis? So I was like, okay, this is, a person asking a question. I like to, trust but verify. So I went on and I was just like, all right, how about you just tell me? Let me just go to the source. I'm going to go to the WHO. I think they're liars. I think that, it's not really what I think. It has been reported on that information given to them by China was not given to the world as a whole. 1. 2, the information initially given to them by China was false. 3, we've looked at China through the Wuhan files that were given to the Washington Post to corroborate everything in point 1 and point 2. So I then conclude that you can't trust the WHO. You certainly can't trust China. However, given the information that's available to us, we can at least conclude that when it comes to vaccines, they're going to try and soften the blow as much as possible. Similar to Dr. Fauci saying, oh, well, I now think that the American public is ready to hear what I think, when back before I said 65 to 70 needs to be vaccinated for herd immunity, 75 to 85%. Now it's at 90. Can't get much higher than 90. He's going to say 100. Is he going to say what everyone's fearing? But what the World Health Organization says about vaccination error rates, right? For example, in measles, right, the expected rate of what they call AEFIs, or adverse events following immunization, for the measles, it's 1 in 1 million doses. Consider this. After 1 million doses, you will have 1. And this is in children who have, reduced immune systems, to say the least. In a lot of cases, compromised immune systems, depending on what we're talking about. Okay. And then it goes on, like oral polio vaccine, 1 in 2 to 3 million doses. Now, mind you, these are vaccinations that took decades, took years to develop. That's why they had a whole campaign. And these were developed decades ago, when we had far less sophisticated technology, mind you. So I understand that perhaps the march of time and technology can expedite the process, but I don't think by that much, right? And so given that with the measles vaccine, for example, 1 in 1 million doses causes an adverse effect, we are now already at 15, 16, 17 reactions between 2 vaccinations. And you're telling me I shouldn't be concerned? All right. I will continue to do my due diligence, because the reality of the matter, as I continue to say, is that you should not, not that you cannot, but you should not take anything to heart that's being told to you anywhere by anyone, whether it be an organization or an individual. You should do your own research, to step into your own agency and take control of what you digest as an intellectual, as an individual. But with that said, what I'd like to do is oh shoot. Okay. So what I'd like to do now, let's see here, right, is talk about The Guardian and the WHO, because we were just talking about the World Health Organization themselves, their numbers for measles, right? It's 1 in 1 million that actually have adverse reactions. So working off the WHO also says COVID-19 is not the big one. COVID-19 is not the pandemic, the contagion that we have been waiting for and needed to worry about all this time. It's not the one that we're going to shut down the world for, although we've kind of have already, which means this will happen in the future again and worse. Experts tell end-of-year media briefing that virus is likely to become endemic, and the world will have to learn to live with it. So what have I been saying all this time? Little old me smokes his pot and thinks his thoughts. Well, this is a coronavirus like flu and cold, right? We've seen it. Let's just look at the numbers, right? This is its top 70 million. It's actually at 80 million now. So 80 million people have been infected, right? And 1.6 million people have died. That's 2%. Just talking numbers. I'm not talking how I feel about it. I'm just talking numbers. That's 2%. If I've typed this incorrectly, which I believe I have, this is 80 million, right? 8,000,000. That's 80 million. 2% of 80 million is 1.6 million. So what we have is the same amount of percentage of people that die from the flu annually, even though that statistic no longer exists. It's the pneumonia, influenza, and COVID statistic, have died from COVID, a new coronavirus, right? Same as the flu, also a coronavirus. I'm not sure on the cold numbers, but I'm sure a lot of people don't die from the cold, but that's also a coronavirus. So what do we learn from all this? What does all of this mean? This means that this knee-jerk reaction that has happened from our government, seemingly the doctors and medical health professionals that have been calling for a calmer attitude and less hysteria, were right. Because now we're being told by the World Health Organization that this has entered our biosphere. We're going to deal with this in a seasonal manner. Well, let's find out. It's going to be endemic. All right. World Health Organization experts have warned that even though the coronavirus pandemic has been very severe, and it's all about the word. It's like everyone's getting infected, not everyone's dying from it. It is not necessarily the big one, and that the world will have to learn to live with COVID-19. The destiny of the virus is to become endemic, even as vaccines begin to be rolled out in the U.S. and the U.K., says Professor David Heyman, the chair of the WHO's Strategic and Technical Advisory Group for Infectious Hazards. The world has hoped for herd immunity, that somehow transmission would be decreased if enough persons were immune, he told the WHO's final briefing. But Heyman, who is also an epidemiologist with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, said the concept of herd immunity was misunderstood. It appears that the destiny of SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19, is to become endemic, as have 4 other human coronaviruses. Surprise! In that it will continue to mutate as it reproduces in human cells, especially in areas of more intense admission. Fortunately, we have the tools to save lives, and these in combination with good public health will permit us to learn to live with COVID-19. So again, if the WHO is saying that we have to learn to live with it, shouldn't we be orchestrating or trying to create the new world infrastructure? I hate to say it. World Economic Forum will call it the Great Reset. But shouldn't we be looking towards life with a functional reality as opposed to more lockdowns and we have to get rid of this before we can do anything? That's why people are weary of the government and of media, because the narrative is being crafted that governance seems to be reacting to, because I've no idea. One could speculate on that all day. And it's all flying in the face of reality, where the World Health Organization, which I do not trust to any degree, is saying themselves like, hey guys, this is reality now. This is not going anywhere. But, so this situation, this crisis, right? And there's a saying that goes, never let a good crisis go to waste. And China definitely hasn't. They've utilized this to the utmost, back especially during the first wave. They have taken advantage on the geopolitical scale. They've taken advantage on the physical military arena, trying to go into the Arctic Circle, trying to impose their will on Taiwan. And so here we also go. China pushes for a QR code based on global travel system. Xi Jinping has called for a global mechanism that would use QR codes to open up international travel. We need to further harmonize policies and standards and establish fast tracks to facilitate the orderly flow of people. The codes will be used to help establish a traveler's health status, but human rights advocates warn that the codes could be used for broader political monitoring and exclusion. Now keep in mind, this is the same country that has committed human rights abuses pretty much since its establishment by Mao Zedong. We have everything from the imprisonment, execution, dismemberment, and torture of political dissidents, to the denying of Chinese minorities, to the denying of religious freedoms, to the mass surveillance of its entire populace. Of course, under Mao, this happened. Millions died from starvation. Blah blah blah. Yeah, I don't need it. Not blah blah blah. I don't need. I'm just like, I don't need to go on. You understand? So all of that, given the history there, the welcoming of China to the global stage is hilarious, right? But no one wants to call out but no one wants to acknowledge that China has become a big dog in the room. And now China seems to be openly pushing for the Orwellian system it practically has already, right? So what's worse is that back in June, the State Department said that China could be conducting covert biological weapons research, right? So this also comes on the heels of the State Department sending cables back in October of 2019, stating that they were fearful that the Wuhan Lab of Virology, which Anthony Fauci is associated with, he's done work with them and taken work from them and done that work in the United States, did not follow their safety measures as stringently as they needed to. There were reports and interviews with doctors there who talked about bats pissing on them and them needing to quarantine themselves and being attacked by the bats they're working on. Yes, they were working on bats. They were also working on what's called gain of function research with coronaviruses to change the functionality of the virus. Remember, every day we talk about, yes, mutation is natural. What we're looking for is the mutation of its functionality. So it mutating is fine, but as long as it is mutated into something worse, that's what we need to be looking at. So that's the research they were doing at the Wuhan Lab of Virology in China. The same Wuhan lab that was like 180 feet away from the wet market lab that everyone was claiming this started out as. And mind you, by the way, no one seems to be talking about that anymore, huh? That's very interesting too. I love it when that happens, right? Down the memory hole it goes. Washington Times says China is conducting clandestine biological. The headline reads, China conducting covert biological weapons research, State Department says. China is conducting clandestine biological weapons related research and has failed to disclose past offensive germ weapons work, according to State Department reports made public on Tuesday. This was back in June. Beijing also is hiding nuclear-related test data by blocking sensors from an international monitoring system used to detect underground nuclear blasts. The unclassified report provides new details regarding U.S. concerns for many years related to Beijing's biological weapons research that is not permitted under the 1972 Biological Weapons Convention signed by 183 nations, including China and the United States. And it isn't as though the United States doesn't break that as well. The Biological Weapons Convention bans the development, testing, and use of biological arms and requires dismantling all past germ weapons. The United States has compliance concerns with respect to Chinese military medical institutions' toxin research and development because of the potential dual-use applications and their potential as a biological threat. The U.S. government approached China about its concerns and will continue to monitor Chinese biological activities, the report said. In addition, the U.S. does not have sufficient information to determine whether China eliminated its assessed biological warfare program, as required under Article 2 of the Convention. Article 1 bans all work on biological weapons. Article 2 requires elimination of all germ weapons program. So again, this is the same China that is calling for a global, what I presume is a global QR system that can be readily used for coronavirus vaccination detection. And it will always be all of this surveillance, all of this authoritarian intrusion into our lives, the micromanagement of our lives thereof by governance, right? Starting with things like lockdowns and the inability for you to religiously gather, which has been struck down by the Supreme Court, thankfully, to, the Assembly 416 in New York State, the forceful removal of those who are deemed a public health risk, ergo those who are sick, to China's national QR system or the banned system that the United States wants to use, to the detection system that we're all going to have on our phones probably if, nobody listens to reality, because the WHO is even saying this now. This is the new reality. COVID's not going anywhere. Fauci's saying we need 90% immunity to have herd, which isn't going to happen. We're seeing all sorts of anaphylaxis reactions to these vaccines, and that's apparently statistically out of whack. This isn't adding up to the situation clearing itself up anytime soon, even though the World Health Organization is saying, okay, guys, we need to start looking at this in terms of it being a part of our lives, not in terms of us waiting for it to go away. But just going to jump on to the weird bandwagon here. A woman got beat by a sheriff with her own baton. Now, why am I highlighting this? It is because I've talked often every day about the pressures being put on our populace by both, plutocratic politicians, by jackbooted law enforcement officials, And before you go pull in the race card, this is a black woman police officer who I want to say was attacked by a white perpetrator with her own baton. So the whole reality is that this woman's had enough, really, of the situation with the mask, and that therein lies the issue. If the mask mandate, well, it's not really a mask mandate, kind of. In New York, we kind of had a mask mandate. It wasn't enforced. But if the mask mandates didn't work in the first place, why am I to continue doing it? If the WHO is telling me that we're going to be living with this anyway, then what are we doing? What is it that's going on? And as little information as there is being told to us by mainstream media, which the majority of people get their news from, we have more enforcement. We have more hypocrisy from the people offering the enforcement. Because mind you, it seems like every time a governor or a mayor comes out and talks about more stringent lockdowns for the holiday season, for the new wave that's coming up, first thing they do is turn around and do the opposite thing. Without answers nor results, we're just being told to shut up and listen. That's not working out for a lot of people. But coming on the latter end here, we're talking about Georgia, where Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue, both Republican senators, they don't care about anybody but themselves, but consolidating power. That's how most of these people function. That's how most of these people work. So we really haven't heard anything about like their depravity, their personal depravity. That's with the other side, the Democratic gentleman. God, his name keeps escaping me. The Reverend. But they're still corrupt. Corruption. So Georgians are starving, reads the Jacobin Mag, and their millionaire senators refuse to force a vote on aid. Yeah, so to begin, Republican Senators Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue could actually force a Senate vote on $2,000 checks for almost two-thirds of Georgian households. After all, their state is in the middle of a calamity. Instead, they're issuing belated meek platitudes. It's almost too on-the-nose reflection of America's oligarchy that the fate of $2,000 survival checks for starving people will be decided by a Wall Street magnate and a corporate executive who ran a retail chain that preys on low-income communities. And it will all play out in a state facing rising joblessness, poverty, and starvation. But here we are with Georgia, and its Senate race is likely to decide it all. If you were writing a Hollywood screenplay about this, you'd almost certainly set it in the Peach State and its special election. One of the Senate races features Republican Kelly Loeffler, who was plucked out of the financial industry and appointed to the Senate. There, she quickly made lucrative stock trades after a government briefing about the pandemic, and also got herself named to a panel regulating the agency that polices her husband's business empire. The other Senate race features Republican David Perdue, who has also spent his time in the Senate making stock trades to boost his personal wealth after running Dollar General, where he faced allegations of wage theft. As if this cartoonish corruption wasn't enough for a made-for-TV drama, the two zillionaire Republican incumbents are running against Reverend Raphael Warnock, the anti-poverty crusader who runs Martin Luther King Jr.'s church, but who also ran a summer camp and obstructed child abuse charges, and apparently ran over his wife's foot, which I saw via body cam. I didn't see him run over the foot, but I saw when the cop arrived and attempted to deal with the situation, he was he refused to deal with the cop, and his wife stood there crying her eyes out, talking about, yeah, he's a politician, he plays this game, I've been quiet about his whole, because she works for him. And it's one of those situations where, I would presume she's worked for him for some time. They got together, fell in love, got married, and now it's gone sour. So obviously, the Jacobin Mag, being the Jacobin, is going to present this in a skewed light. But, everyone's bad. None of these people are decent, okay? And John Ossoff, a Pete Buttigieg-like Saturday Night Live caricature of a blank slate political candidate who has rightly zeroed in on the issue, calling the GOP's proposal for $600 a joke. A Pete Buttigieg-like Saturday Night Live caricature of a blank slate political candidate. Interesting. They make Warnock, that's his name, they make Warnock seem like a saint. But, we don't need to continue. We've read for a few days now about that. I was going to read about some of Ted Cruz's nonsense. Ted Cruz's Georgia runoff fundraising is actually going to his campaign, and he's not alone. But what a surprise, these people are corrupt and all of them are utilizing their positions of power to gather more money. Um, I think I'm gonna end it on Hawley and Walmart though. Senator Hawley openly said he will object to the Electoral College results, ensuing a doomed fight to overturn Biden's win. So Hawley was the senator that worked with Sanders to introduce $2,000 bill. So good on him. But this isn't exactly the best move. This, unfortunately, see, the whole thing is like everything is too far forward now to stymie it, unless you want to cause a constitutional crisis. And it's like it's one of those things where we're past the point of no return, and it will have to be looked at retroactively, like with everything else, with every other election corruption issue. We will have to look at it after the fact and say, oh well, this is where the process went wrong, and this is where the process went wrong, and this is where the process went wrong. But it's too far forward now to try and hold up. Honestly, that's really the way I feel about it. But Walmart, just like the New York Post. Oh, Trump needs to stop this undemocratic coup and take it like a man. And Walmart calling Hawley a sore loser. But of course they had to walk it back because, their base is probably a good portion conservative. Uh, where people seem to forget, corporations are run by other people. Other people who have a stake in making it seem as though they are part of the zeitgeist. They're part of the movement, right? And you've seen companies do this. You saw Gillette do this, where it chastised men for not being good enough and then lost $8 billion market share. You saw Nissan do this with Brie Larson in a more minute way, and that campaign tanked them for like $30 million, something like that. So $3 billion, some obscene amount of money. And the list goes on. This whole woke attitude that corporations are trying to have, in most cases, fails them miserably. And it is amazing to me how people still don't seem to understand the considerable amount of personal influence that goes into the decisions these corporations make. Yes, it's about money, but at the end of the day, if the politics of a situation can garner them more money or more influence, they'll go for it. They'll go for the clicks. But I don't even shop at Walmart anyway. But that'll conclude it for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. And yeah, just stay happy, be well, and be well to each other. Take care.